Okay, so this is all the stuff you need. Gel-less base for the colored powders. The sealer dry to dry it and file it, and then the top. Okay. Which one are we doing here? Okay. So for the glitter ones, I put a coat of this sunscreen first, so that it has somewhere to have the glitter on. And this goes as thin as I can. Wipe it off on the bottle and thin it out. And dip it in the sunscreen. Then we do the glitter color. Move them around a little bit so the powder and the glitter mix. And we wipe the excess off a little bit. And the same thing, the gel-less base. Can't see that here, let me see, there we go. The gel-less base again. And now I go all the way to the cuticle. As close as you can without having to clean it up. And then dip it in the glitter. Okay, now you do the same thing for all the different colors. I use two different bases if they're dark or light colors, just so that it doesn't get all stained inside. Okay. Okay, so for the glittery ones, I only do one coat because I feel like when you do two coats, it becomes like super thick and you lose the glitter, like the shininess of the glitter. So I do a sunscreen on the bottom, then the glittery, and then one coat of the natural sheer set, which is that. And it almost is just like a super clear coat that sort of protects the color, so when you file it, you don't ruin the glitter. I do that for every color, every nail when I do it, and I always make sure I wipe off once you go on the nail and it already has any type of powder, I wipe it off so that I don't get it into the container all the time. So that's just the sheer one, and it's just like a protection layer on top, so when you file it, it doesn't ruin it. And after you do that to every nail, make sure I use 2 coats of everything. Whatever color I'm gonna do, I do 2 coats. And I always wipe off the excess so that you don't put your finger in the powder and stain your new powder with the color that you're using. So I do that for every nail, and then I will come back. All right, so that's glitter, and I'm just doing this separate because I'm doing different colors on the same hand. So now for like the neutral light colors, I don't do any base with the sunscreen. I just go straight to the clean nail with the base, gel-less base, whichever one you have for light colors. The first layer I go almost as close to the cuticle as I can, but I leave a little tiny space. So when I put the second layer, it doesn't make it too thick at the cuticle line. So I wipe it off a little bit without dipping into it to take off the excess. And then that kind of makes it thinner. And then I dip into the color. Now the second layer of that then I'm gonna go all the way to the cuticle as close as I can. But then doing it like that with the first layer with a little more distance, then it doesn't have this little like step at the cuticle line. So then you do that for all your nails, and then you brush everyone off lightly, and then you go with your second coat of that same color. And then you put another coat of the Jealous base and put your natural sheer set to protect the color on the top. And then you're gonna do another step and then file, but we'll get to there. So here's the second coat, and I just show this quickly. Go all the way to the cuticle without getting it on the cuticle. Wipe it off again without getting any more. And then another swipe through just so that it thins it out a little bit, and dip it in. Tap the excess off because otherwise it has like speckles on the cuticle line. Okay. So now just to show the dark one, your Jealous base on the clean nail. I haven't put any coat of anything on there. I take a little bit of my white bit, and you put it and leave a little tiny space, and we'll see it when I put the powder on. Wipe it off a little bit, and it'll have a little space at the cuticle line that we can see there. So there's always a little tiny space there that when I do the second coat and I get to the cuticle line, and you don't have that bump on the as close over here. What, dipping in the powder? Yeah. All right, here we go again. Second coat. I'm gonna wipe off the excess. Wipe off the underneath so you don't get too much powder on if you're doing a different color or something. So take some again, not too much, all the way to the cuticle, as close as you can, covering that little white line space that I left there. So then now you have like an easier transition without it being like a step up almost. I try to wipe it with a little lint-free cloth. And then you dip the second coat. And then you tap it. If it's too wet, I re-dip it. And then it looks like that. All right, so in this one we can see there's like some imperfections, but that's with the only with the first coat. So when you do the second one, maybe on this nail you leave it a little bit thicker so it picks up on those spaces. And then when you re-dip it, it's gonna cover those holes. So that's why you always kind of want to do 2 or 3 layers if your nails are super thin. But I usually do 2. Dip it. And I tap it off. And it looks a little wet still, so I just re-dip it and tap it off again. And then you see it's all covered. There's nothing left. All right, so after I'm done with all the colored, glitter, nude, dark, whatever, then I do a coat of the sheer on top of every single one. Natural set sheer. And it sort of makes a little cover on top of the color, so when you file it and thin it down, it doesn't you know, you're not directly going over the color and messing it up and making it grainy or something. So I do the same thing, a super fine layer of the Jealous base, or whatever brand you're using, the base liquid. I do a really thin layer wipe it off, then another pass through to make it thin, and then a dip in the set sheer. I don't re-dip that one because I don't want to make it any thicker than it already is. And then I do that for all the nails. So for the dark colors, let me see the other thing, this finger. I do, when I'm gonna do the last layer of the sheer, I do try to wipe it off really, really good, because I don't want to get any of this color powder into my white one, well, sheer one. So I don't stain that one, because that one you basically use for any color. So then when I do that, I do make sure I wipe off really good, even on the bottom of the finger, so that I don't stain that one. And then this is just a really thin coat for the sheer that goes on top to just protect the color and kind of encapsulate it in there. And then dip it in the sheer, quick tap, and do a quick tap, and don't re-dip so you don't make it any thicker. All right, so the next step is, after we're done with all the layers of color and then the sheer, set sheer on top to protect it, then you do sealer dry. So we'll start with this one. So we do the sealer dry on every nail. It's very like liquidy alcohol kind of. I make sure I go all over. Doesn't matter if you touch the skin. And I go on all of them really good. And I do the tip too, just to make sure this thing hardens the powder. And so when you file it, it's not gonna break apart. It's just gonna file down. So you do that on all the nails, and then you're gonna file it with a thicker file, and then I buff it with a thinner buffer just to smooth it out. And then, you know, once you make it as thin as you can, or as thin as you'd like, then you wash your hands with just water, and then you come back and do another coat of this sealer dry, which just basically makes sure that it's super hard before you do your top coat. And then I'll get there in a second. All right, so usually when I file, why is this blurry? Let's see, there we go. Okay, so when I file, I kind of square off the edges over here so that they're not like bumpy. Both sides. And I find that when I do the glitter, if I file right on top of the glitter or buff it, then the glitter loses its like shimmer. And that's why I put that coat of the natural sheer set, so that you're really, what you're filing is and buffing is that layer, and not really the glittery one. So I just basically buff it and file it till it's thin enough that I like, and then that's it. Okay, so now after they've been washed, file down, make as thin as possible, or as thin as you'd like. Then you wash them with just water, and then we're gonna do another layer of the sealer dry. This just, I think, makes it super hard again, and they really don't crack or move or chip or anything. So another layer on all the nails. And then after that, you want to make sure to wipe off the excess of this liquid before putting on the top coat, because I didn't do that at first, and then the top coat brush got hard like a rock. So I take a lint-free pad thing that I got on Amazon, and I make sure I wipe them really good and dry, like on the edges and then underneath, so that none of that liquid is going to transfer onto the pink. So that none of that liquid is going to transfer onto the top coat brush. Okay, so you do that to every nail, and then you're gonna do the first coat of the top coat. You're gonna do thin and super fast. So I do almost like probably 2 or 3 strokes. That's it on the brush. I mean on the nail, and nothing else. I don't go over it. I don't do anything else. Top coat. Like I grab it and I make it as thin as I can. And I do like 1 and 2, and then I move on. And that's, I don't do anything other than that. Then with the second, I'm gonna let that dry for a second while I finish the other nails. While I do the other hand, and then I'm gonna let that dry for a second, and then I'm gonna go back with the second coat, and I do it same thing, same job, top coat, but now I'm gonna do it still thin, like not a lot of the liquid, but then I'm gonna do a bunch of brushes, almost like polishing it, I guess. And then I have found that if I do 3 coats of this, it becomes super shiny, even though I know everywhere they tell you to do 2. But I do 3 coats. And then I have a trick to do at the end to make it stay super shiny and to harden up and dry up super quickly. So then you can actually not have to wait the 5 minutes or whatever minutes they tell you you have to wait for the top coat to dry, and that shine and stuff stays on forever. So this is my second coat of this. I do a lot of passes through, and then I'm gonna do a third one, and that's what's gonna make it super shiny. Okay, so now for the third coat, move this way. Same thing, gel top coat. I grab a little bit, and then I do a third, just, you know, a few passes through. I don't brush it too much, just to make sure I have the whole cuticle, closest to the cuticle as I can. And it's super shiny. So I'm gonna do my third coat of the top coat, which I know sounds strange, but I do the third coat, and then I'm gonna wait just about, I don't know, 30 seconds to a minute for this to dry up a little bit before I'm gonna apply a coat of the sealer dry on top, and that is what makes it stay super shiny and dry, pretty much immediately. So that's the third coat of the top coat. And then I'm gonna grab the sealer dry. Move your hand this way a little bit. I'm gonna grab the sealer dry, which is strange, I know, and then keeping the hand super flat and the brush of this thing super flat as well. Like I'm not gonna go like this. I kind of just pass a little bit of it on top of the nail, and that doesn't ruin the color or anything, but I don't touch it. I just kind of like almost like drop the little liquid on it, and that trick makes it dry almost pretty much instantaneously, and it keeps the shine on that. If we can see, let's bring it down a little bit so it stays that shiny. I don't let it dry too much so that it keeps the shine. So I just basically do that third coat thin, then let it dry for like a few seconds, and then with the fingers really flat and the brush and the liquid brush also super thin, you just kind of wipe it, and that's it. And they stay super immediately dry. You don't have to wait 2 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever. It pretty much is dry and doesn't lose its shine. And that's it. And then I put a little bit of a cuticle oil, which is not the one that comes with that kit, but another one that I've bought. And I put it on the cuticles. And because it's dry, it doesn't really matter. It's not going to ruin the color or anything. It stays super shiny and it dries pretty much that same second. And that's what I've found makes it faster for me, because I can just pick up and go. And it keeps it super shiny. It never loses that shine. And that's it. No thought. All right, so this is the final look. Super shiny with my Gaddy trick. And they come out perfect every time. And you can put I always put a little oil on that. I bought this oil on Amazon. Some pomegranate, something or other that smells delicious. And I feel like, you know, you definitely need a little oil because you file and buff so much, your cuticles kind of like get a little dry. But then put a little bit of oil, and that's good. I like this brand just because the powder is super thin and super fine, and so I feel like the color at the end looks very solid and not grainy at all. And I did buy another brand today, and I'm gonna test it out and see what the difference is. But I'm still kind of loyal to this one just because it's so fine that it makes it look like it's a gel color and not grainy at all.